Welcome to this Gŵyl Crime Cymru Festival event, and welcome to Aberystwyth. Croeso i'r digwyddiad Gŵyl Crime Cymru Festival hwn, a chroeso I Aberystwyth. Aberystwyth, the cultural capital of Wales, home to Aberystwyth University and the National Library of Wales, once home to Welsh princes. The Burettes of Wales is the jewel in the crown of Cardigan Bay's stunning coastline and home to hugely successful TV drama Hinterland. And now, the streets that have become familiar to fictional D.I. Mathias's many fans are getting ready to welcome celebrities from the worlds of crime fiction and crime drama, because Aberystwyth is home to Wales's first ever international crime fiction event, Gŵyl Crime Cymru Festival. During the early May Bank Holiday weekend of 2022, Aber, as the town is affectionately known, will play host to a multitude of events that will offer something for every fan of crime fiction and drama. Internationally successful authors will entertain and meet readers in historic buildings. Pub quizzes will bring together authors and readers. Writing workshops, meet the agent sessions, and informal readings will help encourage and develop new writing talent. And in sparkling celebration of new Welsh talent, a champagne reception for Crime Cymru's first crime novel competition winners. This will be an Aberbank holiday weekend like no other. So, come for the crime fiction and take Cymru home in your hearts. Rydym yn edrych ymlaen yn fawr iawn at eich croesawu I Aberystwyth ac I Geredigion.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Gŵyl Crime Cymru Festival. On behalf of Crime Cymru and our festival partners, Aberystwyth Town Council, welcome to panel number 13 of Gŵyl Crime Cymru Festival Online. I'm Jacky Collins, and I'm delighted to welcome you to this event, series, standalones, and beyond. Now, if you've been watching the other panels, and I hope you have, you'll know that we feature an independent Welsh bookshop with each session. And our bookshop is Great Oak Bookshop in Llanidloes. If you're inspired, and I'm sure you will be, to read any of the author's books mentioned in our discussion this afternoon, please do consider buying from Great Oak. At the end of our session, you'll be taken to the programme page of the festival website, where there's a click-through link on our event to Great Oak. We're also taking audience questions, and I do believe you've begun to submit your questions already. We'll take those in the last part of the sessions, but do put those now in the YouTube chat. And Amy Williams of Crime Cymru will be bringing those questions to us at the end. So let's get down to that criminal business. This afternoon, I'm joined by three brilliant authors. And our first author, this is a bit of a dream come true. It has taken so many years to have this amazing moment to welcome Peter James, a UK #1 best-selling author, best known for writing crime and thriller novels, and the creator of the much-loved Detective Superintendent Roy Grace. Peter has won over 40 awards for his work, including the W.H. Smith Best Crime Author of All Time, And so it's an amazing privilege, Peter, to be here with you this afternoon. And the CWA Diamond Dagger Award. Peter James, welcome to the festival. Thank you for being here. How are you?
Good. You know, I have a very fond connection to Aberystwyth. My first ever girlfriend went to Aberystwyth University to study librarianship. And I had my first ever kiss on the top of a double-decker bus in Brighton.
That is wonderful, Peter. We've been encouraged to ask authors about their links to Wales or anything that they're fond of about Wales, and I think you've set us off with a wonderful anecdote as to what Wales has meant to you, that fond memory. Bless you for that. I am going to come back and ask you lots and lots of questions, but if you'll allow me to introduce our next panelists, yeah, I'll be back with you. Next, we have Ragna Jonasson, an international #1 best-selling author from Iceland, whose books include the Dark Iceland series and the Hulda series. Since the age of 17, this author has translated 14 of Agatha Christie's novels. And I love that connection, Ragna, of you and such illustrious crime writing and how you are becoming, if not already have become, one of those illustrious crime writers. You were also the co-founder of Iceland Noir, the Reykjavik International Crime Writing Festival. And thank you for agreeing to be part of Gŵyl Crime Cymru Festival this year. How are you, Ragnar? Welcome.
Thank you. I'm very good. Here in Reykjavik, as usual.
Yeah, and for now, but hopefully next year we can welcome you to Wales, and that would be so wonderful. There is so much to ask you about your series. We will concentrate, though, if you don't mind, a little bit on your latest standalone. But if you'll allow me to just introduce our last author, and then we'll get into that discussion. Thank you for being here, Ragnar. Our third author is Welsh crime writer Chris Lloyd. The author, welcome, Chris.
Hi, Jackie.
Hi, Chris, how are you doing?
Very well, thank you.
Yeah,
enjoying some beautiful sunshine.
Isn't it? It's a perfect way to spend a bank holiday, a mix of sunshine and criminal goings on. If anybody is not familiar with Chris's work, just a brief introduction. He's the author of the Elisenda Dominic crime series, featuring a police officer with the newly devolved Catalan police force. But your most recent novel, The Unwanted Dead, a superb piece of writing. It's his first novel set in Paris.
Thank you.
Featuring Eddie Giral. And it is an absolute joy to proclaim here online that The Unwanted Dead has been longlisted for this year's CWA Sapere Books Historical Dagger. Many congratulations on that, Chris.
Thanks a lot. It was a wonderful way to start the day, I must admit. It just didn't enter my head I'd be longlisted, so I was so delighted.
Yeah, I think it's a very special novel. I think that it bodes well, and I'm going to ask you, is this going to become a series later on? Because sometimes when those first novels are written, and readers just say, please, can we have some more? And I know that's been being said about Eddie Giral. But good authors. I wonder if we might start by, Peter, would you give us a brief introduction to your latest novel that will be published this month, Wish You Were Dead? Could you tell us a little bit about that, Peter?
Oh, so Wish You Were Dead is a quick read that's coming out on May 27th. The novel, that's 100 pages, which I've done for the reading agency. It does have all my main characters in it, but the novel is called Left You Dead, and that's coming out on May the 12th. And Left You Dead is the 17th in the Roy Grace series. And it's an idea that I've had in my head for a long time. There's many times that I've been driving somewhere with my wife and she's wanted to dash into a store to pick something up. And I sort of pulled up outside a shop or a supermarket and she's dashed in. And I used to think, what if she never came out again? How long would I wait? What would I do? And if I then went into the store and she wasn't there, what then? And then I started to think more darkly, well, would anybody believe me that she actually had ever been in the car in the first place? And that is the starting point for Left 4 Dead. It's a couple, every Sunday they go for a drive in the country and they visit a National Trust property. And every Sunday they have an argument. And this particular Sunday they're arguing about cat litter. He should have picked some up 2 days ago and forgotten. He got some yesterday. He now wants to get back home to watch the start of the Belgian Grand Prix. And she is insistent that they stop so she can get some cat litter. So they pull up outside a big Tesco superstore outside Brighton. He waits in the car, she dashes in, and she doesn't come out again.
Wow. What would we do if our beloveds never came out again, if we lost them without a trace? Peter, I wanted to ask you briefly, this is a series that is so well established. 17 books now in this series. And the development of your main protagonist, it reminds me, we're talking about here about a relationship, about a marriage in this novel, that where is the partner gone? And I wonder if the development of a character like this is very much like a relationship. How have you kept fresh together after 17 novels?
Well, I love, it's a great question. I actually love Roy Grace and the team. So every time I'm planning a new book, I sit down and I think, hey, Roy, how are you doing? How's things going with Claire? I get Norman Potting, who is the character that everybody loves to hate because he's completely politically incorrect and non-woke. I always say, who have you pissed off this month, Norman? And of course now, with John Sim playing Grace on television, I've got this kind of real life model in my head, which everybody said to me, you'll find that you've now got John in your head when you're writing Grace. It's not been a problem because he actually is how I always imagined Roy Grace looking. So I've just got the added details and I've got a model in my head as I write. But in terms of keeping fresh, I think that I remember when I was a kid and reading all the kind of the authors that I loved back then, like Alistair MacLean, and so many authors, it seemed to be as they got more successful, they got lazy. Their books got fatter. Like they couldn't be bothered to edit, or their editors were scared to edit these big names. And I always vowed that if I was ever lucky enough to have any kind of success, the one thing I would always try to do was raise the bar with every book. And that's what I keep trying to do.
Thank you. I do believe you do. I think your success speaks to that. And thank you for that answer about that main protagonist. Thank you. Ragnar, might I turn to you and ask you about your latest book, The Girl Who Died? As it is at the moment, it is a standalone, I do believe. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So it is my first standalone, and it deals with a young woman. She's a teacher down in Reykjavik, and she's an advertisement for a job in the northeastern part of Iceland, literally as far away from Reykjavik as you can imagine if you would draw a direct line to the other corner of Iceland. And there is this small village of only 10 inhabitants. And they are looking for a teacher to teach 2 children there. And she has her own problems here in Reykjavik, and she thinks this might be an excellent way to escape and start fresh. And so she moves there in wintertime. And just from the first day, this is for her quite a difficult experience. The people in the village really seem not to want her there. And then when she goes to sleep on the top floor, she wakes up at night hearing a little girl singing. And so that's basically the outline, and then I won't tell you anymore. But
no, I mean, we definitely want to know more, but the joy is in the discovery of the text. But for yourself as an author, you have 2 extremely successful, well-established series. And I just wondered that movement into doing a standalone, how has that transition been for you?
It was quite easy. I had, more or less stopped with the first series with Ari and Sigurður. And then I had done the trilogy of Hulda. And that was always supposed to be just a trilogy. And so it was basically after that book that I felt I had a chance to do something different. And it was great fun. It's basically like disposable characters, so you can do whatever you want and you never have to meet them again. And it was just an idea that came to me. This this concept of someone moving to this, teach just 2 kids in a remote location, and yeah, there are like these slightly ghostly undertones there, although it is a mystery and it's not a ghost story, but depends on the reader how much you want to believe.
I'm going to come back and ask you a little bit about the folklore that you drew on for this text, if I may, later. But thank you for that. It's icy cold, as it should be, and scary, and it left me with the sense of you searching for somewhere else to be, to leave things behind, isn't necessarily the best way forward. But on to Chris. Chris, you left Catalonia behind and you went north to Paris, and you went back in time. Can you tell us about that choice? But first of all, introduce us a little bit to this new novel.
Yep, the Unwanted Dead is the first in a series set in wartime Paris, featuring Eddie Giral. Eddie Giral, you pronounced it so much better than I do, who's a Paris police detective trying to cope with the occupation. Eddie's a deeply flawed character. He's a survivor of the First World War. He suffered shell shock. He spent nearly 2 years in a German prisoner of war camp. After the war, he went to Paris, became a police officer, and his life went into free fall. He became a drug user. He made some very bad decisions, made some mistakes, but he got his life together. And so when we come to him in 1940, he's not a reformed character, but he's a calm character. But then this first book takes place over the first 10 days of the occupation, and it opens on the day the Germans march into Paris. And when 4 Polish refugees are found dead, gassed in a railway truck, and later on the same day, a 5th Polish refugee commits suicide, leaving behind a safe with 3 seemingly worthless books in it. The police don't really want to investigate this death. It's too complicated. It's not right on the first day. It's too much for them to cope with. But Eddie does. It's all Eddie has. It's almost a chance, if not redemption, for him to see some sort of normality and carrying on what he does. All he has is his job. All he can do is try and find out what happened to these 5 men. And of course, as he does that, as he investigates it, it brings him into conflict with not just the police, but the German authorities. There's an Abwehr, German military intelligence officer assigned to the police to work with him, who proves to put obstacles in Eddie's way. And then there's also the great rivalry between the Gestapo and the Abwehr, who are vying for power at this time in Paris. The Gestapo weren't even supposed to be there at this time. And so as Eddie uncovers more and more about these deaths, he finds that there's a far more sinister and far-reaching events going on, which brings him into greater conflict with the Abwehr and the Gestapo. And he realizes that if he's going to see some sort of justice done and survive the occupation, then he's going to have to take a choice between, does he unleash his old mad, bad and dangerous self? And that's yet another conflict that he has to face.
Chris, thank you for that. I love all those levels of tension that you play with throughout this novel. I think you don't often give us a chance of respite as we move through these pages, and that, you know, it was a text that certainly took me out of the times that we're in at the minute. It was a great escape in that way. I'm going to come back and ask you a few more details on that, if I may. But I'm going to start with a first general question, and I'll put that question to you, Peter, first, if I may. When you wrote that first book in the series, did you ever think that Roy Grace would take you further? Because you'd written a good number of standalones, had you not, before then? And I wondered what was different about Roy that made you think we've got a future together?
I didn't. I'd written, as you rightly say, about 18 standalones, some of them very forgettable indeed. And I was asked by Pan Mac in 2002 if I would be interested to create a new fictional detective. And way back in 1981, when I first started writing, I wrote very bad spy thrillers. Then the best thing that happened in my life was we got burgled. And a young detective came to take fingerprints, and he was married to a detective. My then wife and I became friendly. And through them, I started meeting other police officers and eventually being invited to go out on shifts. And that's how my kind of relationship with the police began. And I'd met a young detective inspector in 1997 called Dave Gaylor. He was a homicide detective in Brighton and Hove. And by 2002, he'd risen to become Detective Chief Superintendent, basically head of major crime for Sussex. And we'd become good friends. So when Pan Mac asked me, I went to Dave and I said, how'd you like to be a fictional cop? And he just loved the idea. And we kind of worked together. I had a 2-book contract and I just thought that would be it. And I kind of modeled him very much on Dave, not physically, but career-wise. And I just thought, oh, well, I'll do 2 books and then move on to something else. And I was trying to think what it is that would make Roy different to all the other fictional detectives that I could remember. And there was a common denominator between fictional detectives, that they tend to have often a broken marriage and a drink problem. It's a bit of a cliche, but it really works. I thought, in England, no cop with a drink problem would last 24 hours. And I thought, what detectives do is they solve puzzles. But primarily every major crime is a huge puzzle of hundreds, if not thousands of pieces. Would it be interesting to give a detective a puzzle of his own that he couldn't solve? And that's when I came up with the idea of Roy having a missing wife, Sandy. And we learn in Dead Simple that she had literally, on his 30th birthday 9 years earlier, vanished off the face of the earth. And that while he functions as a homicide detective, all his private life is spent looking for her. Doesn't know what's happened to her. And I thought, well, I'll set up the mystery of Sandy in book 1 and solve it in book 2. And after Dead Simple came out, I was inundated with emails from readers guessing what might have happened to her. And I thought, I could have some fun with this. And I kept the whole Sandy thing going for a long time. I think it right up to about 13, 14 novels. And I'd get the most wonderful emails from people saying, I think my favorite was James. I've just worked out I'm a lot younger than you, and I imagine I'm a lot fitter, which means you're going to die before me. So I hope you've left the secret of what happened to Sandy safely in your publisher's vaults.
Do you know what I love in that story, though, Peter, is the way you responded to reader comments, you know, and that impetus to drive you on with that and to keep, you know, in that creative mold with the series.
I think it's great. I'd be interested to know what sort of Chris and Ragnar's views are, but I think it's really great to listen to your readers and to interact with them. You learn what they like, and you learn too what they don't like. My God. But I've learned a lot just from that. You know, there's a lot to worry about with social media, but there's an awful lot as an author you can learn too from it.
Thank you, Ragnar. It's a great moment, I think, to ask you, you know, just what Peter's been saying, the influence of readers on your writing. Has there been any? How have you responded?
Yeah, good question. To be honest, I think the only time I've sort of properly responded to the readers is the fact that I actually decided to write a sixth book about Ari Thor in that series, which I had in my mind sort of put on hold. But you know, there were a lot of requests from one more, and I had it in the back of my mind somewhere what would happen. So I did that last year. But otherwise, I mean, I usually just sit down and write something that I think I would be interested in. That's you know, quite selfish in a way, but you know, if then the readers respond to it, I'm really happy. But usually it's yeah, it's the other way around.
And a difficult question maybe to ask you, but that moment when you know it's over, again, it reminds me of like relationships. You know, it's like we're done here, and it's been great, but we're done. Have you, you know, like with the Hulda, with it being a trilogy, you knew? Did you know from the get-go when you started that this was going to be a short-term thing, and we'd be finished?
Yeah, that was always supposed to be a trilogy, and it was always supposed to show her life in reverse, and you know, start with the end and then work its way back to the beginning. But having said that, when I actually had finished that trilogy, and there was a moment that I felt that there was a little bit more to be told. So what I've done now is I've actually started a new series that features the young policeman who takes up Hulda's job in the darkness, the first book, where she is retiring to make way for a new policeman. So I thought, you know, might be interesting to follow that guy and see who he is, because he never appears in the other series, but we just know he's there in the background. And there he's sort of a threat there to her job, basically. But it turns out he's a nice guy, and so I'm doing a new trilogy featuring him. And in each of these three stories, we see a little bit more of Hulda. So in a way, she will get 6 books, not 3.
I love your style. I love your style because you start something new. You give us maybe what we might have missed. That is clever strategy. Very much appreciate that. Thank you, Ragnar, for your response as well. Chris, the move that you made, again, you know, a trilogy with the Catalan series. Did you know you were done?
For the time being, yes. And it also, for the time being, yes. I mean, one day I would like to come back to her. But the whole thing with Elisenda, it's tied in with the history of modern Catalonia. and so she's an officer with the newly devolved police, the Mossos d'Esquadra. But with events recently in Catalonia, that's changed. And they were regarded as the police of the people almost, but the relationship between the Catalan police and the people of Catalonia has deteriorated since the failed referendum, the failed independence attempt, and a lot of people have left the police. The complexion has changed. The whole way it goes about its work has changed, and it's sort of knocked me back. I had to get used to the idea that they changed, that the Mossos I was writing about and the city of Girona that I loved, things had changed and had changed for the worse, and I had to get used to the idea. Now I possibly am getting used to the idea, so yeah, maybe I would go back to her story. I did also leave Elisenda a little bit left on a cliffhanger, her own life, but yeah, it is unfortunately conditioned by real events that almost moved me away from it.
What I'm hearing from the three of you, though, is the need for a successful author to have flexibility when it comes to what you do with your work. Now, we've been tasked with series standalones and beyond. And before we maybe get to audience questions, Peter, if we think about the beyond, and I want you to think about the stage plays that you've been involved with, your work been adapted, and then the TV series, the recent TV series. And I wonder, though, because of the work that you've done in script writing, there can be really, really excellent novels, but they might not necessarily make great adaptations. What do you think it is? What have you seen over your time writing? What are those elements that make a good adaptation?
I think books are primarily, and I'd be interested, I'm sure Ragnar knows his work, would agree, and I'm dying to read Chris's book about the occupation in Paris. I'm fascinated by that subject. It's such a great terrain. People, first and foremost, and the first thing that both Chris and Ragnar have mentioned is character. And books are about characters. We read books to see what happens to characters we engage with and stay with. We don't have to always like them. I mean, Hannibal Lecter is an immense and the good adaptations are the ones where that's recognized. But you have to remember also, as an author, a bad adaptation can really hurt you. And I remember before Roy Grace, I had 3 books adapted. The last was a book called Hosts, and it was made a big production by ABC Television in America, $11 million. It had Mimi Rogers in it, Jacky Lloyd, Robert Vaughan. And I met a guy, a builder at a party in Brighton. He goes, what do you do? What do you do? Oh, anything yours I might see on telly? I said, actually, yeah, I've got this on at the moment. And his face fell off a cliff. He said, look, don't take this the wrong way. He said, I thought it was so awful, I'd never bother to read you as an author. And if you think that even a modest television success is going to hit 6 million people, and you as an author, you're unlikely to sell more than a few 100,000 in the UK. So most of those people, that's the first time they're going to hear it, and if it's right.
Yeah.
And so I was incredibly protective about Roy Grace. It's why it took 17 years to bring it to the screen. We went through some real, what they call development hell. I remember back in about 2007 getting a very excited phone call from a 3-year-old then running part of the BBC, saying, oh, yeah, BBC Scotland want to put up all the money. I said, why does BBC Scotland want to make a television series set in Brighton? Oh no, we've had this idea about moving it to Aberdeen. I said, has anybody read the books? He said, oh yes, we think Roy Grace could be transferred to Aberdeen Police. I said, do you know what I think? Foxtrot Oscar.
Yeah. And again, in what you're saying, the notion that the author, the creator, should be able to say, I'm sorry, but that won't work. I can't let you do that, and not be, and not be swept away by, oh, this sounds wonderful. It's going to, it will get my writing better known, but to have that integrity to say, I'm not going to go there.
No, I'm lucky. I had my background for 25 years before I wrote full-time was in film and television, and I just knew how easy it is to screw something up. So I was determined to maintain a level of control, and it's the same with the stage plays too. I mean, I've been blessed both with television, with working with amazing writer Russ Lewis, who totally gets Roy Grace, and with Sean McKenna, who totally gets in adapting the plays, and they've been really happy experiences, unlike the first 3 yonks back. And John Sim, it's just a delight.
Yeah, without a doubt. And thank you for sharing those thoughts. If we stick with adaptation, am I right, Ragnar? I've read that The Darkness is soon to be a major TV series. Am I willfully dreaming, or is this true? Put your microphone on, sweet Ragnar.
Yes.
Yeah.
Just to start, I would like to say to Peter that I saw the adaptation of your book, and it was fantastically well done, the new one. So
thank you.
Really looking forward to seeing more. It was really, really nice to see, and I wish I could see your stage plays, but I'm sure the lines of travel between Iceland and the UK will open up soon, so I can.
Yes, hopefully. Thank you, Ragnar.
But no, the Darkness was sold to and is being developed by CBS, and it is absolutely, hopefully, on its way. The plan is to film it in Iceland, actually. They have an Icelandic production company working on that already. So I don't know exactly when it will start or who will be in it, but I'm optimistic that something will happen there, and I think everyone's very excited about that one. And we are also, I can say we're pretty close to something with Ari Thor as well. I don't know.
Really?
Yeah.
Excellent. As the author then and the creator of these characters and these storylines, in allowing other creatives to do something else with them, are there certain things that you are not willing for them to change?
Yeah, I've had some. I mean, in the past we've had some discussions about the Ari Thor books, and I've had, without going into any details, I've had discussions with producers or directors who wanted to take the character into, so totally different direction from what I imagined, and some very strange requests, to be honest, and making it into something it definitely isn't. And I said no to that, and so there are some clear lines, and I think it mostly has to do with the main characters. I mean, the storyline and the plot can probably be adjusted, but you want at least in my case, I would want the core of the the atmosphere and the main character to be sort of in line with what I was thinking. Otherwise, I think it's pretty, otherwise it's probably better not to do it, to be honest.
I think that follows on very nicely from what Peter was saying as well, and the importance of the character, and how it's that character, especially the main character, that takes an adaptation along, just as it does in the original. Really, really look forward, Ragnar, to, without wishing to sound greedy, both of those coming to our screens soon. Yeah, wonderful. Now, Chris, let's delve into the past. And you gave us a lovely introduction to your book, and I wanted to know specifically, not anything to do with adaptation now, but the research that you did with regard to the refugees in particular, and why. I mean, were they stories that you came across, or have you created something around other things that might have been present in your research?
They began with a germ. I knew some of the story of the refugees, not a great deal, and it was an area that always fascinated. And of course, refugees are so much in the news constantly, and there's always this demonization of refugees. And of course, I discovered that the same thing happened at the time in Paris. There were a lot of people in Paris or in France, who didn't want to accept refugees from the East, from Poland, and it was as I researched more, I knew certain things of what happened, and the story that Eddie reveals, but I didn't know the extent of it. And it's one of those things you start to research, and your jaw drops more and more and more as you learn the true story of what happened. And so I suppose in a way it was yes, wanting to give a voice to that. It's a story that is not really told much anymore. And it does sort of, in a way, go back to one of my favorite reads as a kid, was The Silver Sword in Silesia, which is about Polish children fleeing Warsaw at the end of the war. At the end of the war, not the beginning. Whereas this, the more I researched, the more horrified I became at the story that these people and what they had to put up with, not just in Germany, but once they got to other countries and were, demonized almost to an extent. And so it was that research. There are times when the research becomes the parent of the story. So there was the germ of the story. I knew what I wanted to write about, but it was as I discovered more that became more central to the story that I wanted to write.
Thank you. Now, I am aware of time, and as I say, questions were already being sent in before we began the session. So I can imagine that by now, that there's quite a few stacked up, and I really would like people to be able to get their questions in. So I wonder if we could welcome the wonderful Amy Williams into our session. Hello, Amy, how are you?
I'm good. How are you, everybody?
Hi, thanks, Amy. Hi.
Fantastic. Yeah, so we had questions coming in before the panel had even started. So I've been fielding the questions as you've been talking. And actually we have audience members from South Africa, Nigeria, Dubai, Canada, the US, Italy, Ireland, all across the UK. So we really, really are international today. So the first question, and you've all kind of briefly touched upon this, is from Alex. And he would be interested to know your opinions on whether a TV adaptation, or indeed a film adaptation, could change the arc of a long-running book series. Should we start with you, Peter?
Good question, Alex. I think that there is a great tendency among film, television, particularly television producers now, to want what they call returning series. So if Netflix put out a series, even if it's only like 6 episodes, even if it's only 6 books, they want another 6 and another 6 and another 6. And I think it's not always a good thing. I think so often there's some great first series, but I'm not sure that it's necessarily. I think, as we were saying earlier, and Ragnar was saying about a series having a life, and Chris was saying, I think you as an author know if you've had enough and want to move on. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean that doesn't always chime with the public. Conan Doyle had enough of Sherlock Holmes, but he could never create anything that was as commercially successful, so you had to bring him back. And you get that kind of time again, if you're lucky enough to have a series character that people like and want more of, then it's a tough decision to kill them off. But I think that there is also a big seduction with television that can make you, if you're not careful, start writing really bad books. I don't know if I'll get to that situation with ITV and Grace or not, but we'll see.
Brilliant. And what about you, Ragnar?
Yeah, I think there is actually a moment where TV has sort of changed the story of Ari Thor, because as I mentioned earlier, there have been a few sort of attempts to either buy the rights or to do a series in the past few years, and one of those was probably 6-7 years ago, or even more, when I had written maybe I'd written probably 3 or 4 books about Ari, and I was actually and we sold the rights for a moment to an Icelandic firm that didn't go through with it, but because of that, I book that is now called Whiteout in the series. It wasn't supposed to feature Ari at the time when I started writing it. I was planning on another character, you know, a secondary character from one of the earlier Ari books. I was going to make her the lead character in that one, and I was actually at that time prepared to give Ari a rest. But you know, in the back of my mind, the thought of, you know, a possible TV series, I thought, you know, might be better to stick with him. So that's the reason why he is in that book, actually.
Brilliant. And Chris, if you were to get an adaptation, do you think you could be persuaded to change the direction potentially of a series, if that's what audiences of the adaptation were calling for? Are you with us, Chris? Maybe not.
Lord,
Okay, we'll come back.
The one thing with the Eddie series is that his story is so closely tied. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, you're back with us now.
Hello?
Hello?
Oh, sorry about that. Where was I?
Yes.
Hello? Can you hear me? Sorry about this. I think everyone in my street is on the internet today. The one thing about Eddie, the series, is because his story is so closely linked to the history of the occupation of Paris and of France. So I would sort of hope many changes that they end up changing the real history, which I think would really quite annoy me. But coming back, Peter and Ragnar both talked about it beautifully, the character, it comes back to the character. And one of the things that I feel is important to me in the Eddie books is that no one is wholly good and no one is wholly bad. There's nuance between the characters. And I think that is something I would also fight to try and keep in an adaptation. But let's see if someone offers me one.
Fingers crossed, Chris, fingers crossed. So the next question that we have is from Sue, and this one is for you, Peter. And she asks, do you have any plans for Roy's son? She says there has to be a secret there.
Well, in Left You Dead, there's a big development.
Ooh.
That I can promise.
I'm sure Sue will be very, very pleased that she's going to get some more information on that one.
Yes, yeah.
So the next question that we have is selfishly one of my questions. And I've done quite a few panels for this festival and elsewhere. And the one question that I always ask, I'm always fascinated to know, is that if you were stuck on a desert island and could only take 3 books with you, what would those 3 books be? Should we start with you, Chris?
Yeah, well, the first one's obvious for me. It's Josephine Tay, The Daughter of Time, which I just think is the perfect crime novel. You have there are no car chases, nothing, no bright lights or something. You have a main character who's actually in a hospital bed. But it also, more importantly, it actually contributed to historical research. So that, I think, it's just the finest crime novel for me. A Another book I would probably take the Ian Sorelia book, The Silver Sword. I think it's the book, my mum gave it to me when I was a kid, and I think it's the one that told me I wanted to write. So I take that. And finally, probably Gulliver's Travels, Jonathan Swift. I think it's the most beautiful satire ever written. I think every satire since then owes itself to Gulliver's Travels. It's a wonderful book.
Fantastic choices. And Ragnar, what would you take with you?
I think I would take one Agatha Christie novel. I think it would be The Murder on the Link. It's one of my favorite of hers, and it's a really charming setting of France. I think I would take one Golden Age American one as well. Probably Ellery Queen, The Dutch Shoe Mystery. It's really, I'm rereading that at the moment. Yeah, it's a wonderful story. And I think maybe The Great Gatsby.
I love that one. I've reread that one, I don't know, maybe a dozen times now. And I learn something more about it on every reread. Have you, I don't suppose you've heard of the book Nick by Michael Farris Smith? Oh, you have to check that one out. It's a history pre-Gatsby. So it's a kind of a prequel to The Great Gatsby, and it's brilliantly done.
I've heard about it, actually. Yeah. I will check that out.
Brilliant. And you, Peter, what would you take with you?
Well, I think I'd first take Brighton Rock by Graham Greene. That was not just the novel that made me want to be a crime writer. It was the first crime novel I ever read. And Greene wasn't a crime novelist per se, but it was the first crime thriller I ever read where I realized you could have a moral dimension to it. You know, you have the central character. Well, firstly, I love it because it so much traditionally has become with the dead body on the first page, and then the book is a puzzle to solve it. Whereas in Brighton Rock, the victim was still alive at the end of chapter 1. You know, within 3 hours of arriving in Brighton, Hale knew they meant to murder him. You know, you have to kind of read on. But then you've got this central character, Pinky, who is a 17-year-old boy gangster in charge of a bunch of middle-aged misfit loser criminals. And he's a murderer, but he's also a devout Catholic, terrified of eternal damnation. It's just a wonderful story. The second, I think I would probably take the Oxford Book of Quotations, because I would just have endless inspiration from looking at the great nuggets from so many people who've lived before me and during my time. And then the third book I would take for my sanity is Kurt Vonnegut's Slaughterhouse 5. That is a book that I read and reread, and it's just gentle philosophy, you know, and it's such a book for our time now. You know, I don't know what's going on, and I guess I'm not smart enough to understand as someone were to explain it to me. I think we're being tested by someone or something a whole lot bigger than us, and all I can do is hang around and try and be calm and friendly and have a nice time till it's over. It's just a brilliant book. It's an anti-war book. It's a book that so extols the virtues of humor and of human relationships and love.
Fantastic. The next question that we have is from Mary, who asks, what are the strengths and weaknesses of a standalone in comparison to a series? Should we start with you, Chris?
I don't know. I haven't actually written a standalone. Every time I try and write a short story, I think, well, I want to turn this into a novel. I want to explore it more. And so I have a couple of ideas for standalones, but I can't help putting off writing them because I want to turn them into a series. So I'm probably the wrong person to ask, because I love series. I love the idea of being able to develop your characters, develop issues through them. As you get to know your characters more, you learn the themes that you want to write about, and you know how they will respond to it, how they will define it, determine it. So I think the strengths and weaknesses is that it's my weakness in not being able to get down to the idea of writing a standalone, I think. So I'm sure I'm the weakness there.
And Ragnar?
Yeah, I mean, as I said earlier, I think the strength of a standalone is you can do pretty much whatever you want. I mean, there are no consequences. You won't, do anything else with these characters. So it gives you a lot of freedom. But as Chris said with the series, I mean, I agree. I mean, what I enjoy doing with the series is to develop the main character and in more depth, basically.
Thank you. Peter?
I guess for me, it's with the standalone is to explore themes that really fascinate me, that wouldn't really work within the context of a crime novel. So my kind of more recent ones have been Perfect People, which is I wanted to write about genetics, genetic engineering, designer babies, with absolute proof. I wanted to explore religion. What would happen if somebody could credibly claim that they had proof that God existed? Not right for a crime novel. And the one I've been working on, I haven't started even writing yet, but my own family. I have a family mystery of an aunt who went over the Niagara Falls in 1964. And she was a Jewish refugee from Vienna. And I've always wanted to write about the Nazi occupation of Austria and Germany and the aftermath. It's one of the reasons I'm fascinated with Chris's Paris. Again, it's a theme that wouldn't work for Roy Grace, but it's something that I really want to do. So it's if you like the freedom. I write a standalone probably every 2.5 years. So I'm writing a Roy Grace every year, and I work on the standalones in between and do the research. And I love the freedom, as Ragnar says. You've got this complete freedom, but equally I love sitting down with Roy and the team and going, okay, what's going on, boys?
Fantastic. We have a question for Chris from Alice, who would like to know, did you go to Paris a lot to do on-the-ground research for the Unwanted Dead, or was the research mostly confined to the library and the internet?
No, I did go to Paris a lot. This was before lockdown. I started writing the book some years ago, and so we were still able to travel then. I do like to walk the streets of where my characters live, and I also like to know where they live. I don't know, I suppose I'd like to know what they see when they walk out their front door, what they smell, the sounds they hear. And it's probably a bit sad, but I like to take their walk to work. I like to go from their house to where they work, just to know what they see. So yes, I did. I was able, luckily then, I was able to spend a lot of time going back and forth to Paris, checking up on things, going to the various museums, the police museum, the resistance museum, what have you. But yeah, the last year has all been Google Maps and Wikipedia and my nice growing collection of research books. Yeah.
Fantastic. And one last question, because I'm conscious of time, and I'm interested to know from all three of you actually what your writing process is like. Do you write at a particular time of day? Do you have a particular writing spot? Do you listen to music? Do you have to write in silence? Should we start with you, Ragnar?
Yeah, the best time for me to write is like late in the evening. I would say maybe from 11 o'clock onwards.
Or night owl then?
Yeah, and I can pretty much write anywhere when I'm traveling. But it is nice. I have my own office here, and it's a nice area, and good to have a fixed setting for writing. But otherwise, I can go to a coffee shop or on an airplane or wherever, and if I have some peace and quiet, that usually works.
Brilliant. And Chris?
I need complete. I usually write in the mornings. I find it easy if I haven't written a certain amount by a certain time in the morning, I almost have to give up. I need to sort of be at work first thing and write. I need complete silence. I can't have music. I sat in this room sweltering because I have the windows shut because of the noise from outside. What I do is I play a piece of music before I start writing to get me into the mood. At the moment, for this book I'm writing at the moment, it's J'attendrai by the Hot Club Quintet of France with Django Reinhardt and Stefan Grappelli, and it just gets me into the right place, and then I need absolute silence. I have a lovely writing room. I trained myself badly. I like writing with two screens. One, the story I'm writing, and on the other screen is the synopsis, my outline, which I keep adding to as I go along writing. So I'm afraid I can't write anywhere else because of that, unless I walk around with a computer and a big screen, which isn't terribly practical.
Brilliant. And Peter?
I can write. I've learned to write over the years anywhere. I actually finished 2 novels on long haul flights. I love writing in a hotel room because you've got no distractions. You can pick up the phone, coffee appears, and you know, when I'm on book tour, I just get on with it and write. And like Ragnar, coffee shops too. But my favorite place is home, and I have 2 writing times, and my day is back to front. So I actually start at 6 o'clock in the evening. Vodka martini with 4 olives. Put on music. I have a playlist, and in fact, my wife Laura makes me a different playlist for each novel. She has stuff that she thinks I'm going to like, and I write till about 8:30 in the evening. And then we stop and have supper and watch something on television. And then I start again in the morning. I'm a keen runner, so I either run, I take the dogs out, and I go for a run. And then I hunker down and I read what I wrote the night before. The vodka wasn't too big and the couple of glasses of wine I had after didn't get me too smashed. That makes sense. And I try and write about 1,000 words at night, and then I edit that, but normally add to that. So it probably ends up being about 1,400. And I do that till about 1:30. Then I break, and the afternoons I just deal with interviews, do interviews or deal with email or take the dogs out again.
Brilliant. Well, that's all the questions that we have. Thank you so much, everybody, for answering the questions, and for the audience for asking the questions. I'm going to leave you now in Jacky's capable hands.
Amy, thank you so much. Thank you, Amy, for bringing us those questions. Bye for now. Well, sadly, our time is drawing to a close. I wish we had longer. I have an ever-growing list of questions to ask the 3 of you. But I just want to thank the audience for being with us for this session. Thank you for tuning in from all around the world to listen to these 3 fabulous authors. Please don't forget our independent bookstore that we're recommending should you wish to get hold of any of the authors' books that we've talked about, and that's the Great Oak Bookshop in Llanidloes. And finally, on behalf of Gŵyl Crime Cymru Festival, I'd like to thank the panel members this afternoon, Peter James, Ragna Jonasson and Chris Lloyd. Thank you, each one of you, for sharing your ideas, for taking us in to those special aspects of your writing, and for exploring the notion of series, standalones and beyond. Thank you for being with us. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.